Hello and welcome to Unit 5 in our game design class. We are going to be making a platformer style game for our next project. Platformer you might recognize as a game like Super Mario Brothers, any type of game where you play a character and you have to jump from platform to platform, and it's a side scrolling sort of design. So that's sort of what we're going to be doing next. First up, as always, you're going to source what assets you want to use. And real quick, I want to kind of show you what's out there and give you some tips for finding some good resources. So, as always, you can always go to our Google Classroom. And in our Google Classroom, there is going to be in the resources plenty of links that you can follow through to find what you need. So in the resource section, there's the resource sites, which I've added to as I've found various places. Kenny is, of course, on there. Game Dev Market, Open Game Art, all that good stuff. You'll find plenty of things on. I've also got the asset packs that I've purchased for your use in this class. And just various other resources as you need them. Always available in the resource section. Don't forget to check there. And you can do that, or you can always go to Google. What you're going to look for key phrase wise, I would use is free platformer tile set. That will bring up plenty of resources. So at top of the list, we've got itch.io, which we've covered before. We've got Open Game Art. All kinds of stuff. So say I were to open Game Art here and see if it's bringing me to a search page or to a specific tile set. We'll see when it opens. Also, the itch page link goes to here. I'm really liking what I'm seeing here. You can see lots of, this is obviously designed to be a side-scrolling game. It looks like platforms. It's not like a top-down view. There's all kinds of different types of themes that you could source for this. There's bright themes, there's more dark themes, there's more cartoony styles like this, there's more pixel, old school style. It really kind of runs the gamut. Yeah, so this is a big platformer page search list that I clicked on earlier. Got all kinds of different themes, caves, castles. Yeah, so you get the idea. Also, of course, we've got the asset store. I use the search term tile set and then change the price down to free. If you have questions about that, you can always go to my I think there's a video on here that I've made for core skills. Yes, core skills, how to find assets. If you get confused, you can always go back to the how to find assets video. But make sure you get a tile set that looks like this, where it's obviously from a side view and not like this, which is from a top-down view. For a platformer, you want it to be side scroller. So some of these you'll find on multiple sites. For example, Sunnyland is a pretty popular one. So it's in many places. Ansimus, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he posts it on pretty much every resource site. It's also on itch. If I were to scroll through this list, I would probably find it relatively quickly. So source your information. And another thing, I want you to make sure that you take note of the name of the person who created it. We're going to make sure to add a credit page to this game to credit everywhere that we got all of our assets from. That includes our sound effects, our background music, our characters, our particle effects, our platforms, all that good stuff. We want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due. Another trick that I'm going to show you is whenever you find something, say you search for assets and you find something you really like, but you don't want to search for it from inside of Unity. It's easier to search in the web browser. You can add it to your assets or favorite it, and it will be easier to find. So I think for this game, I'm going to use something pretty simple. I think I'm going to use this pack. So when you find your asset pack, I do recommend go to the full details page. And on here, I recommend you check the package preview to make sure it has everything you think it's going to have in it. Make sure it actually has a tile set in it. And the type of tile set that you are looking for needs to be one big picture with all of the things on it, so that whenever we slice it up, we'll put it in our palette. And I'll show you how that works here in a minute. But you want to make sure it has something like this, where it's like a big picture that's all of the tiles put together. So you need that. But what I like to do is you can either heart it to add it to your liked items, or you can there should be a button here, if I hadn't already added this, that says add to my assets, so you can do that. And whenever we go into Unity, we'll be able to import it from the Asset Store tab. So let's go ahead and jump in and get our game made. So whatever you want to call it is fine, is up to you. I'm just going to call mine generically the 2D platformer. So I need to make a new 2D platformer. Obviously, the template is going to be 2D, just like all of our other games. It's going to go straight where it always has, and I'm going to create this project. 2D platformer already exists because I have a GitHub version, or I have a plain version, not a GitHub version. So I need to put it in a different folder for now. So let's call this 2D platformer Git. Yeah, that'll work for now. Everything's fine. Okay. This is, I'm adding the name because I make these games in advance a little bit so that I can figure out all the problems that you will encounter and try to fix them before it gets to you. Just works out better that way. So that's why there's an extra folder in there, and I just haven't moved things around just yet. So let it import, and eventually we'll jump back in. Okay, so now we have a nice empty screen, nice clean project. It's been a while since we've had one of these. So let's go to the Asset Store tab. If you don't have the Asset Store tab, remember you can go up to Window and figure out where it is. I think it's in General, and then click on Asset Store, and that will add the tab to your screen. So to navigate around here, if you favorited the things that you were interested in, you can click here and it'll take you to everything that you have favorited. So there's that. If you added it to your assets, it will all be right here. So it's pretty easy to find things if you want to shop from the website and then come in Unity and grab specifically what you want. So let's go ahead and download this. And it's a pretty simple package, so it shouldn't take too terribly long. I'm not going to try to separate anything out. I'm just going to take the whole thing as it is. I'm not probably going to use the enemies and the characters from this. I'm going to grab probably my own. But just for the sake of keeping it neat and tidy, I'm going to bring everything in. So click import. And let's look at what we got here. So I know earlier I found the tile set under sprites, which is great. And even better is it is already pre-sliced. You can tell because whenever I imported this, it had this tab right here. If you import one that is not already sliced, it's exactly the same as whenever we cut apart our sprites for our explosion animation. You would go into the sprite editor, and then you would click on slice, and then you change this based on whatever settings you need it to be. These particular sprites are 16 by 16, so I would change it to cell size and then change it to 16 by 16 and then hit slice. But in this case, because I got it from the Unity Asset Store and it was already ready to be in Unity, the creator kindly made it so that everything would just be there and ready to go. So that's great. Don't have to worry about that. So we are going to, in this game, use something called the Tilemap. We are going to, or tile palette. We're going to create a tile palette that we can paint onto our scene and make it so that whenever we put tiles down, we can design it as needed and design our levels kind of on the fly. So first thing we need to do in our hierarchy, we're going to right click and go to 2D object, and then we want to add a tile map. So the tile map, whenever you click on it, it brings up this grid and this thing right here called a tile map. We'll leave that for now. We'll probably rename it based on what we actually put in that tile map. And we need another window open. So let's go to Window, 2D, and Tile Palette. Wherever yours pops up, it might have popped up floating. Mine popped up over here on another tab with the inspector. Whatever works is fine. So we need to, first I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning up here. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this folder stock so that I can separate out exactly what I want. Everything's going to move in there. I'm going to make a new folder called tiles. And then I'm going to grab my tile set sprite and I'm going to go ahead and put that in tiles before I do anything else. And the reason for that is I want to make sure that I don't have to dig through this whole thing anytime I want to access my tiles. I want to go ahead and be able to just have it in its own folder. Like so. I'm going to rename tiles _tiles because that's pretty important to this game. So I want to be able to find it easily, not buried under other stuff. _scenes. Okay. Everything's clean. Beautiful, beautiful. So I need to create a new palette. This new palette, I'm going to call it, I don't know, Grotto palette, because that's the name of the asset that I have. Doesn't necessarily matter what it's called. Cell size, we could set it to automatic, which is nice that whenever you drag in your tiles, it'll automatically figure out what the tile size is. Or if you know exactly what the tile size is, you could go ahead and change it here. I'm going to leave it at automatic, and we'll see how it goes. I'm going to hit create. It's going to want me to put it somewhere. I'm going to put it in my tiles folder because it makes sense to put things in my tiles folder that have to do with tiles, right? So I've got my Grotto palette here, and it is nicely organized. Okay, so to get this into here, you could click and select every single little tile, or you could grab the whole thing and drag it in. It's going to, again, want you to put it somewhere. So I'm going to put it in tiles. I think tiles is fine. Let's put it in the tile sets folder that I dragged over. That way everything is tidy. I like tucking things away inside of folders. If you have not yet figured that out, I'm sure that you have. But once this gets all done, it should be pretty quick for mine because I have a very small asset pack. So now we have this neat palette over here that we can select things and then put them over here. And you'll notice something very odd. So whenever I click here, it's got this tiny little size. And that is because we need to go into our tiles and change some things. So right now it says pixels per unit is 100. And I know for a fact that this was a 16 by 16 tile set. So I change this to 16 and hit apply. I think, yep, now we have it all fixed. So double check what size your tiles are. So how I would do that is I click on any of these tiles, several of them just to double check. See, it says 16 by 16, so that's how I knew that that was the size. Also, it was in the description. So that's another way that I knew how it was. Okay, going back to the tile palette. So I can click on any of these and paint on my screen now. What's really neat is I can build things very quickly, and I can just click and hold and drag around and draw things on here. I can also, if I want to draw like just this block, I could do that like so. But there are even neater, smarter ways that I can do this. I can create what's called a rule tile. and use that tile to automatically generate my scene so that I can grab just one of these and it will automatically figure out what else to put on here. To do that, we're going to have to do a little bit of legwork. There will be a link for you to follow in your assignment. So let me double check to see if it's on here. Yep. So if you go to your Unit 5 platformer, there will be a assignment called Platformer Resources and a link to a GitHub page. This is the Unity Technologies GitHub page. So it is the official Unity Technologies people. We are going to take this stuff that they have, which is called the 2D Extras pack, and it's got these nice scripts and everything all figured out for you to be able to make very nice and fancy ways to tile things. So I'm going to clone or download this. I'm going to download it as a zip, and I will save it. You probably want to save it somewhere very useful. I already saved mine, so I have mine in a folder that I know exactly where it is. You might want to save yours on the desktop, for example, or in your downloads folder, wherever works. I'm not going to save it again because that seems redundant. But I am going to go ahead and grab that folder. So I have that in my Google Drive, my game design, and then the 2D Extras master. So I'm going to grab this whole folder, which you will have to unzip. So remember, right click, unzip, extract all, or whatever it says, and then drag the folder in like you've done a million times now. I trust that you can figure this one out and drag it all in. All right. And so now we've got this in our game. It has some examples of its own that if we were to want to deal with, we could, but I'm not going to worry about this right now. I just need to have it in my game. So now when I right click, I have some more options. So I'm going to right click on my tiles folder. I'm going to create tiles, which is a whole new folder that you've not yet had anything on here because it was created whenever we dragged in that asset pack. And I want a rule tile. It's a tile that we will give some rules to make it generate ground. So I'm going to call this ground, like so. And this rule tile in the inspector looks like so. I'm going to drag my tile palette over here for now, so it's kind of out of my way, and my inspector will show normal. Okay, so our ground has a default sprite, and then we're going to have some tiling rules. So our default sprite, I want to pick something that if there was nothing else on the screen, this is what, or nothing else around it, I want it to look like this particular tile. And since my asset pack is pretty small, I'm hoping that this won't take too long to find one, but I want this like block to be my standalone tile because it looks nice all by itself. So I'm going to do that. So when there's nothing else around, it will default to this tile, like so. And I'm going to grab my tile palette, and I'm going to take this and drag it into my tile palette. So for right now, it's going to look like just the standard tile. And if I were to paint it, it looks exactly like that. But what makes this special is that now we can go to our rule tile and let's create some rules. So we need to select a object. So let's say whenever we want it to check and see if there's something to the right or left, and if there is, we want it to be a top tile and on our screen. So let's go into our ground tiles and see if we can find just the top tile. And we can, it's right here. And like so. And we want to say if there's something to the left and the right, we want it to look like this tile. So now when we draw, it says this tile has something to the right and the left, so it needs to be this tile. And it does the same for all of these, and then it got to these two tiles in the end and said, well, there's nothing on either side, so it needs to be the rule tile. So let's set up these corner pieces here. So we need to say, whenever you're a corner piece, there needs to not be something here or here, correct? But there does need to be something to the right. So let's add another rule tile. It automatically will default back to the first original tile that you made every time. So that's fine. We're going to do that. We need a corner piece. And we want to say nothing here. So you click once and it says check for something there, and there should be something there. But if there is not, you click again, it says now there has to not be something above it. And there has to not be something to the left because this tile is a left corner piece. Then we want to be able to say there is definitely something to this side. Correct? We need to make sure that this tile is here to put a corner tile on. And we can do something very neat. We can say mirror X, and now it will say use all these rules, and then whenever it gets to the other end, it will say, okay, flip all this information. Is there not something here, not something here, and there is something here? So that's how all of this is going to work. Now, right now, this is pretty rudimentary, and it's not exactly everything I need. So I'm going to take my game, or take my rule tile, and set up all the rules to make it so that I can make a big section of ground. So clicking on my rule tile and my paintbrush, and what I just did right now is I used the eraser tool. This stuff should look pretty familiar. It's pretty familiar things that you have seen. None of this actually has to be within the camera view, but for the sake of having it there, I figured it would be a good idea to make sure that, it all looked good. I'm just going to make a simple block for now. Okay. So on these edges, I don't want it to default to this by itself tile, right? I want these edges to be a piece that looks like this. I want it to be a side. So we add another rule, select. We find the side piece, wherever that is. Might be that. Sometimes it's hard to see, but I think it's this guy. Yep, that's the guy. So as you can see, I selected that and it automatically changed everything because it's not reading my rules just yet. This is a left piece, so there needs to not be something here. There needs to definitely be something on the inside and something above, because we're looking for, if there's a piece here, there should be something above it. Don't really care if there's anything below it. And then we need to, let's see if we mirror X. And then we have this, which is pretty nice, but now we need to make sure that our fill is filled in nicely. So last step, we need to find a fill piece that we want to fill everything with. I kind of like this one as a generic fill piece, and I'll show you how to randomize it here soon. But for a fill piece, we definitely want to make sure everything is around all four edges. And find a tile to go in there. Think it is this guy? Yes, it is. So we need to check and make sure that there's something on every edge. So, why haven't you changed? Oh, we need to make sure that there's nothing on top for this one. Obviously, we have our top piece. We want to make sure there's nothing on top. And this is a lot of just playing with the tiles to change and make sure that everything kind of works out the way you expect it to. Because if I were to draw this, I get kind of a weird sort of scene, like a T shape, like so. Okay, so it's defaulting here because there's nothing below it. So I could fix this by drawing something below it. Or I could say I don't necessarily care if there's something below it, and that fixes it also. But one thing I'd like to point out is that now we've got it so that this tile is always exactly the same, and it's not very natural looking. So in this section here, there's an output. Right now it's single, right? It could be random or it could be an animation. Let's check random. And we've got this size, which you might recognize as an array. So let's change our size to 2. And it's automatically filled in some none sprites. But let's go find the other tile. There we go. So it's not great. Not perfect. I can change the change the shuffle so that it's random and rotated. I can mirror the X and the Y. Kind of like rotated. It's something. Anyway, so here's my challenge for your first video of this lesson. We're going to get started off. I want you to go ahead and pick out your tile map. Whatever it looks like. It can be as simple as this one. It can be a very complex one. The Sunnylands tile set is very nice, but very complex and could be a fun challenge, especially if you want to make something woodland-like or anything like that. You can do that. Find your tile map, import it into your game, and set up a rule tile for your ground. And then I want you to make some like various cases of shapes, and then set up rules so that anything that you were to draw, if you were to draw a platform or a wall or just like any number of different weird shapes that you might want to draw, and double check that your rule tile fills in all of these shapes appropriately. So this is probably not perfect, right? I've got this tile is, I mean, it's not bad, but not probably perfect. So like, for example, whenever I draw something here, now I've got this nice corner, but I've also got this tile right here that has this weird, it's got the right-hand piece, but there's no bottom on this corner piece, so it looks strange. So maybe I want to set up a tile so that maybe it defaults back to this whenever there's nothing below it. I'm not sure yet. I'll figure it out. So go ahead and figure it out. It doesn't have to be entirely on your camera because we're going to erase all this later and set up an actual level. So yeah, get going on that. So welcome back from your challenge. Before I go on, I want to kind of show you how I set up my tiles. I did this one, and then I'll show you how I did it with a slightly more complex tile set. These are the rules that I've determined will work best for me. I've got my default tile is this tile with kind of a slash through it. And the order of my tiles kind of follows in like a check for this first, and then if that's not true, go to the next one sort of way. Because just like C#, whenever we write our code, the thing that gets written first is the first thing that gets read. So the first in the order here will change how things interact. So I don't know if this will do anything, but say I move this. Yep, if I move this up here to the very top, you see that now it's reading that as more important than checking for a corner tile, which is not what I want. So if I put this back where it was, which I think was here, maybe here. Yep, under the corner tiles, that changes how it acts. So if you got stuck on that, don't worry. It's pretty simple fix, but it is something to watch out for to make sure that things are being read in an order of priority. So basically, I've said I want this to be the default tile, and then at the very top, I say if there's and I assume that this was a tile kind of like sticking out to the side. So say I have a tile that is like this, where it's sticking out right here and there's nothing else around it. In my end of my video last time, I had a really weird interaction with that. So I decided to say if there's something to the left, nothing to the top, to the right, or to the bottom, then I want you to put this tile in there. I put it at the very top because otherwise it was being overridden by other things. And I also gave it an array of sprites of 3 and gave it 3 different sprites to pick from to give my game levels some variety. And I also set the rule to rotated so that it'll be true of any spot that just kind of sticks out by itself will have the same interaction. It'll always be one of these kind of greenish tiles. And I also set the shuffle to rotated so that the tiles will rotate themselves and look a little bit different every time that they're put on the screen. Next up for this top tile, the rule that I've set up is if there's something to the left and the right and nothing above, then use this tile. It's a pretty important rule, so that one is the second in my list. Next up is corner tiles. So this is a top left corner. You can tell because the lighter edge is right here. So I said if there's something to the right, nothing above, because obviously we don't want anything above here, and nothing to the left right here. I don't particularly care about if there's anything under it or to the diagonals of it or anything like that, so that doesn't matter to me. Then go ahead and use a corner tile. This is my bottom corner, which is light on the bottom left and the very bottom, because I wanted my tiles to look finished in these corners here. So on that one, the rule is if there's something to the top, something to the right, nothing to the bottom, and nothing to the left, then go ahead and use the bottom corner tile. Left tile, something to the right and something above, because we don't want to put this tile here before we have a top corner piece on top. And I have this one set to mirror X. I also have all of these other ones set to mirror X. Now I could probably have tried to use this one as a rotated one, so it would use all corners, but it didn't quite look right whenever I did that. Sometimes it would do some weird mechanics, so it's better to just have this bottom one set to mirror X and the top one set to mirror X. At least with this tile set, you might be able to get away with it, especially if you have a much simpler tile set. This one's for my very bottoms, this bottom edge. The last rule that I really care about is that if there's something above and there's nothing below, that there's a bottom edge tile. And then at the very end of my list is my fill tile, because I basically want to say if none of these other rules apply and there's something surrounding the tile, then go ahead and put a fill tile in. So the fill tile, I have an array of two. I have two different fill tiles so that it has some variation in what's inside of the center, so it looks a little bit more natural. And that one is set to fixed direction, but the output is random and the shuffle is rotated. So they appear kind of randomly and they'll appear in random directions, which I like. Those are the rules for this tile set. I also used a more complex tile set on this one. So on this level, I have these kind of curly pieces, kind of not really curly, I guess the vines are curly, edge pieces essentially, that kind of cap off the corners instead of these corner pieces. So I have a few more rules here, not too many. So basically I have this, if it's by itself, it defaults to this brick by itself. And then I have my fill tile at the bottom, just like on the other. I've got this corner piece that's diagonal that says if there's something to the left and nothing to the top or right, that go ahead and put this tile in and mirror the X. So if I were to draw two tiles right next to each other, they would just look like a little pyramid of dirt. And yeah, so it's not a lot more complex, but it is. It does have some diagonal rules. So for example, this one checks to see if there's something diagonally underneath of it, because if there isn't, I didn't want to put that corner piece there. See if I take that rule off, it works all right for now, but maybe in some cases whenever I was testing this, it did not. So that's basically setting up your rule tiles. I also, on our game, have gone ahead and added a background. It was just a picture that I added in. I just dragged it in and made it the size of my camera. We will mess with that more later because we're going to attach our background to our camera that follows the player so that the player always has a consistent background behind them. But for right now, I just threw it on there just so I could see how the colors and everything were working together. So what I want you to do now that you've figured out your tiles is I want you to make a level. And after you make not like a whole level, just like a couple of simple platforms that you can test out, jumping and all of that stuff on, but put it within the space of the camera for now. So I'm going to just real quick show you kind of what I mean. I don't want anything too complex, so I think I'm just going to do, I don't know, something like that. Here, I'll put a little square here. That way I can test what a jump would look like, because this seems like a pretty reasonable jump I should be able to make. And I will put my player in the scene after this is all figured out. Actually, we'll make it like this. So it kind of looks like there's like a, I don't know, a cave or something down here that maybe we could fall down into. So just real quick, kind of prototype a simple couple of, I don't know, bumps and ridges for our player to experiment with. And my particular group of assets came with a bunch of prefabs that had characters and had animations. So I'm going to use those and also show you how to make your own if you get an asset pack that doesn't have all-inclusive animated everything. So I'll probably make both at this time. But yeah, this is the start of our level. This is how you use a tile palette to paint and use the rule tiles to generate a nice level very simply and very quickly. So everything kind of follows rules, and it looks nice no matter what, and you can quickly put down levels. Next I think we will mess with our player because we need our player to be able to move and jump and all of those things before we can really move on in our game, because we need to know what those behaviors are going to look like. So yeah, that's where we're going next.